Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this channel. Welcome to today's video where I'm here with Francis again. You may have saw our first video that was diving deep into subjects related to shamanism. Francis studies with Mongolian shaman and does her own intuitive healing work. And if you're familiar with this channel, you know what I do already. So today we're going to be talking more about opening to connection with our guides and how that manifests differently for all of us, and speaking about this from very different perspectives. Maybe we'll allow for people to honor their unique perspective and connection to their guides and not compare it to others. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. How are you doing today, Francis?
I'm doing well. I'm in sunny Sweden. So, like we were talking about before, that's a really fun juxtaposition between us. Actually, let me just take the phone to the window for a second so everyone can see. Um, this is where I am right now. They've had one of the yeah, that's the ski slope up there, but it's closed because of these times. And it's almost 9, so we get just a couple hours of dark here. So that's where I am.
And hold on, we're only 1 hour after the equinox, and you have only a couple hours of
It's
dark.
ridiculous. I've been far north before, but this is the farthest north, and I can't believe how
I've been to Sweden several times, but never that far north. No, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. It's above the Arctic Circle. I'm in a small town called Karuna, and it's on Sapmi, which are the indigenous lands. So there's a whole sort of
Wow.
contention between the governments up here, not just Sweden, but I just feel it's important to honor for a moment the lands that I'm on. The Sami people are in Russia, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and they have a difficult time getting their rights respected for many different reasons in all different countries, but they are the traditional indigenous people of this land.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such an honor to be on their land, and
I know.
yeah, nice.
No, and to really feel supported by the land here, for sure. Magical in trying ways, like we were talking about, just like what we're saying with when you open to these guides and these energies, there's no seatbelt, there's no safety rail, and it can be a really intense ride.
Yeah.
And where are you?
Wait. Well, I'm here in Guatemala. I've spent cumulatively like 3.5 years here since 2013, and I was just coming in for a short visit to reconnect with people. And then the borders closed and my flight's canceled, and I would rather be here than in places where it's a little bit more chaotic. But we are still in lockdown here, current 4, and yeah, we have to wear masks to go out. But it's the Mayan lands is so amazing here at Lake Atitlan, and yeah, I'm growing with this land a lot. So from the Arctic to the tropical.
Yeah. And it seems like such a way in to talk about guides and guidance that I think both you and I are where we are because of listening to these energies around us and flowing with where they're flowing us, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I tune in with my guides before making any major decision and some minor decisions as well. And there's always like a higher reasoning for it that the mind doesn't really understand at first.
Yeah. Yeah, that part of like letting go of control. I remember one of my she's a Mongolian shaman. I only know her in spirit form, but she's very feisty and she was very powerful. And I remember she was teaching me how to do this kind of like work, and she was saying, you call in like the big, and then the details are going to get sorted out. And if you start trying to micromanage how you think things should unfold, you're actually interfering with the plan. You call in the big and then you wait. And if you're going to get it, then it'll flow to you. And if there's a reason why that's not going to come to you, you know, that's how it is. And
Absolutely.
what the other funny thing she said was, she said they always win. She said it's like playing cards, but they control the cards in your hands. And so she's like, don't even bother to like remember the cards that you're holding, because when you look away and you look back, they can change them. So just let go when you're on this ride, and know that you're being taken care of, but you're not in control.
Totally.
How does that resonate with you?
Yeah. It resonates a lot, and it also kind of brings up this sort of thing that this maybe isn't related to guides as much as it's like the sort of resonance that we create with the law of attraction, that when we plan for the worst, we create the worst.
Yeah.
When we attempt to, organize everything to fit into this perfect vision we have of how it needs to play out, we aren't taking the unknown into account. And the unknown and our relationship to the unknown is almost like the most important part of getting clear guidance and clear message.
Mm-hmm.
And surrender in the sense of, and surrender isn't letting go of control. It's just like a deep, humble acknowledgement that you only have so much control. Whereas the conditioned human ego is trained to think that they have control over almost everything, or that they should attempt to control almost everything. And this surrender is just like a humble, like, recognition, like, I can only control so much.
Yeah.
I can only take care of me here in my body. And when you really like settle into that, then the intuition starts to awaken.
That's beautifully put. Yeah. And I think I see in particularly the Western, when I say Western, I mean often circles where there's a lot of privilege, a lot of white privilege, and not a lot of diversity. I think that I get frustrated with the idea that perfection is something that is being strived towards, and evidence of an enlightened awakening. Like, the more my life comes together, the more my yoga studio is successful, the more these things that for me are not actual markers of the path. And like what you say of manifesting, when people are really trapped in that perfection vibration, it just pulls in a whole host of things that are difficult. And of course, our bigger culture supports that, creates that illusion for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's this kind of illusion that, like, when we start to think of attracting success as something spiritual, that also is the goal of spirituality, when it's not. It's like the goal of spirituality is resting into our connection to something greater and seeing how that can uniquely manifest as service. And of course, abundance is necessary to bring us there. But it does remind me of like a point when I decided to go to Hawaii, and everything up leading to that moment was really chaotic. Like, I was really challenged before I arrived. The situation I got myself into when I was there was not what I was told it would be. Then I was in a very interesting dance with someone that was like pulling up strings, and all of this happened right before the volcano erupted. And so I was like living very close to the volcano. I moved there 3 days before the eruption began, and all of this was guided. My guides and my intuition insisted, like, this is where I needed to be. And I went into like the darkest night after that. And that was actually one of the most beautiful chapters of my journey, because I had to go to that deep place of sort of feeling inadequate, feeling like I had failed, feeling like I had so much in my life into place by, leading my first retreat earlier that year, taking things to the next level. I was really striving and it was really working on one level. And then on this other level, I brought myself into this big situation that made me question everything. And in those moments, I made that wrong, made that less spiritual, but in kind of recognizing that process of disillusionment, right? Disillusionment is naturally a part of the awakening process.
Yeah.
There's first all of this, deeper work and this opening to this elation that comes when you connect to the higher realms. And then there's a disillusionment that is really this process of letting go of the control that you think you have over life.
Yeah.
And I had to go through that process. And in many ways, like, that whole journey is there's a lot of like shamanic elements to it with plant medicine and the connections, the people I was learning with in Hawaii. It kind of like planted a seed for me in being prepared for what's happening now on the planet, because then it was an island in a state of crisis, a state of emergency. And as an empath, all of that energy processed through me, and I saw the impulsive nature that arose through me in response to that. And now when the whole world is in a state of emergency, I'm empathically tapped into that. The first maybe week or 10 days, that same impulsiveness arose. But it was like this deep memory of like, oh, I know what happens when everything seems to be going awry and everything's exploding before. And the message for me in this time is to go in. And it like, now it all makes sense. But it's kind of this thing of like following your intuition. Many people will follow their intuition up into a point when their intuition leads them into a tight corner. And then they start to second guess themselves, because it's like, well, if my intuition and my guides are supposed to be helping me, why'd they bring me?
I get that.
And
Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah. And I think I'll let you talk in a second. The foundation of this is basically like your guides don't have the same values you do. Your guides are here for you to wake up. And they will bring you to what is going to wake you up quickest, not to what you have decided you want.
Oh, it's so beautifully put. That's exactly what I'm trying to dance around when I'm talking about this like conflation of like spirituality and perfection. And when you're saying people kind of get into this corner trying to follow their intuition and they think, oh, what? Like, no, that's the sign you're on your path. Oh, your world's falling apart. Keep going. And you put that more beautifully than I could. Exactly. And like we were just talking about, one of the things, sometimes I have this image that like it's all the one, and so any illusion of separateness is on your life lesson plan. Like, what do we need to chip away so that you can get to the place where you can be connected and in and flowing in that oneness? And when I work with people, I find that they really appreciate getting like a little peek in of whatever their like karmic map was, so they can at least, I don't think you ever fully understand the game, or like one of my guides said to me, once you understand the lesson, that means you're almost done. But just to have these like large themes, I find people find helpful. So a lot of times people that are working through scarcity for whatever reason, and you notice they also have a lot of issues coming up with food as well. That comes up a lot. Or like for me, I have not had a home for 7 years, and I want a home. I want a dog. And like I always say, if you give me like a stick and a rubber band in 2 days, I will have made a routine. And that's the thing I will do every day. you know? But I needed this. I don't like it. And but it's clearly like whatever karmic thing I need to work out to be able to merge more. I can't have a home right now. I always have enough food to eat. Food scarcity is, for some reason, at this time, something that I'm not being asked to work through. But home scarcity is, community is something I'm always seeking. And like we were talking, like you with the volcano, that's right when I started following you, actually. That's sort of like um, how I met you, because you were so, I just love how much you just share your journey. And I was just following you on Facebook and I thought, oh my gosh, I totally understand this soul. Like you're finally in Hawaii, and then the earthquake, and then the volcano happened. uh, and so for me, right now I'm basically stranded above the Arctic Circle, and I have absolutely no idea what's happening next. And I have to leave this place in 10 days. I've only been here 7 days, but I have to leave in 10 days. And it's like, are you kidding me? So we met in Mexico. The last time we saw each other, we were in Mexico together. And that was a wonderful and intense time, of course. It's the first time I'd been on Mayan lands, and there was a lot of activation, and I'm sure I'm still working through it. I went back to America, and I was ready for, I decided I was ready for a vacation. I haven't relaxed, I feel like, because it's always going. And I was like, you know what? That was like a really intense spiritual experience in Mexico. I'm going back to Mongolia soon. I just want to chill. And I'm very, as much as I don't have a home, the ability to travel comes very easily for me. And my sister works for an airline, so I can fly for free if there's a seat, which also means I don't feel bad because the plane's going whether or not my butt is on it. So I don't feel like I'm contributing to the ethical issues. It's a gray area, but I feel okay about it. So I was talking to my guys, and they said, yeah, why don't you just go on a vacation? Mexico is intense. So I'm looking at all the flights literally in the world. And it's like, oh, maybe there's an empty seat on a flight to like Milan or Tokyo. All the flights are booked. This is before the virus. All the flights are booked. But there's this one flight to Shanghai. This flight to Shanghai, not only is there a seat available, it's so open. I can have a free business class, which is like the first class, like the lie down seat, a free flight from LA to Shanghai, just drinking champagne, eating food, and sleeping on this plane. So I'm like, great, and I feel totally guided. I take the flight, it's amazing, get to Shanghai, have an amazing 3 days, and then I get super, super sick. This is in January. So I got, looking back, I have a lot of questions about the time there. As I'm becoming sick is when the virus first comes in the news. And I'm pretty close. Shanghai is not so far from Wuhan. It's on the same train line, and I had taken the train. Who knows? But they're saying in the news, oh, the virus is only transmitted from animals to human. It's not human to human. As I'm sick and recovering, the news is changing so quickly. Something like with you and the volcano, suddenly I'm getting messages from my family that are like, you need to get out of China right now. They are going to cancel all the flights. So just like what you're saying, I think, oh, I'm just going to take a little vacation to China, see some sights, go to Disneyland. No. Why did I need to have that experience? I'm sure I'll understand in 2 lifetimes, but it's an experience I had, and I'm still digesting it. So I went back to America. I only had a couple of weeks left that I was leaving, and I had planned to come to Sweden. As I'm in the air, literally, I took off in America. It took about 24 hours of travel. When I landed in Sweden, the situation had changed from when I took off. I could no longer come up north. I was going to go the next day. Suddenly, I couldn't get up here because of the way they changed the travel restrictions. I had nowhere to stay, so I ended up staying with a dear woman who took me in for almost a month. I'm sure she had her journey. Housing me is not easy. I'm quiet, but I travel with spirits, and it's just like what you're saying. Why am I rambling about this? Because I think a lot of people, when they're looking for evidence that someone is like on their path, oh, I should trust this person. Does this person have anything to teach me? A lot of people are trained to look for, oh, they have their shit together, basically. Excuse me. That, oh, this person, look how their business is coming together. My life looks completely chaotic. But internally, I know that I'm doing what I'm guided to do, and I can feel the energies around me are they're working out my karmic kinks in precisely the way I need them worked out to be able to continue with that merge and flow. And I'm not going to say progression or anything like that, but just that like taking disillusion of ego, it looks chaotic, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to go off, but it's I don't know, it just came out.
No, it's beautiful, and I love it because it's really like, I thought we were going to go into the more mystical parts of this right away, but I think this foundation is so important for people to understand that their connection to their guides isn't about what their ego wants. It's like, they're called spirit guides, so they're there to connect us to spirit, and what we need to connect to spirit is to kind of shatter all of the illusions that we've constructed about our human self and what success means, what happiness means, what connection means,
Yeah.
and come into like, you know, a real deep examination of our values and what it means to be of service here. And yeah.
And I love that you keep bringing it back to of service, of service, of service.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Because as you go along, that's all there is.
Yeah. And our guides are just in service to our awakening.
Yeah.
And as such, they can bring us through some topsy-turvy loops.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, is there something more about that? Or
But here we are. And I'm drinking the cacao that I got when I was in Mexico with you in in the Arctic, and we continue to flow. And I think you and I, we talked earlier, just a little recently, and we were both like, well, here we go, you know?
Yep.
And I'm sure, of course, you and I are not the only ones right now. It's sort of like the world climate, not temperature, but the vibrational climate.
Yeah.
I'm sure each person listening to us right now is going through their own personalized kind of lesson plan of the chipping away.
Yeah. And I think coming back to what you're saying of like, well, if spirituality and being good at this isn't about looking successful, what is it about? And for me, it's like, how kind am I to myself and others?
Yeah.
That's like the truest expression of somebody who has grown. And it, without going too far into it, maybe it comes up later, but it shows me some of the like the spiritual narcissists in the field who are all about that image that they portray first before everything else.
Yeah.
And having, you know, these people in my life, what I've really come to see through that reflection is really that it's there can be a lot of unkindness when people are using like a very material based value system. So in this awakening, it's like we have to shift our value system from a material focus to a spiritual focus. Like how do these connections we're creating make us feel in a deep way? And is there this soft, gentle love? And even when we're talking about guides, like some of them are really intense, but when we know we're working with the right beings, there is this quality of love that comes through as well.
Absolutely. And what did Ram Dass said something to that effect? I absolutely love Ram Dass. He's so important to me. And that energy that he carries through is just of absolute acceptance and love. And
yeah,
he has some quote. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't remember it. But basically, the best service I can be to you is to take care of myself. You know, like when I'm faced, there's something about the way that I unfold that I'm just triggering for people. Everyone doesn't like something about me. You know, I'm this white girl in Mongolia. I don't look spiritual enough. That's my favorite one. Just everyone has something to say about me. And it's a really, I've come to really understand that as much as that sort of my visual presentation is a medicine for other people, it's also really beautiful for me to be able to sit with people's judgments and just sit with them. You know, like you don't have, I think for me, the part of like the path and what are we doing if we're not going towards perfection, I want to be able to sit with anyone, even if they hate me, even if they think I'm a phony, even whatever they're going through, and just sit, you know, and have love and authentic love and compassion, not sympathy. Oh dear, you know, or like living in the South, bless your heart. Not, I'm not talking about that. Like genuine. I love you. You know, being a human is hard, and anything that you're judging about me is a piece that you just haven't seen in yourself yet. It's not about me. So I, for me, if we're not going to say that perfection or progress is an indicator of being in the path, for me, it's a very, very internal experience. Can I be still? You know, I'm sitting in tremendous uncertainty right now. Can I be present with that? Not thinking about tomorrow because tomorrow's not happening. Not ignoring the situation, but just being fully alert and present, and in in love. I don't know how else to explain it, you know, like being fully present in the moment and sitting fully in love are becoming more and more synonymous for me.
Yeah.
And what better way to learn to do that than to constantly be greeted with things that I would want to call disappointment, but
Mm.
it it's my path to recognize, why was I disappointed? Was I holding a plan? Was I holding an expectation? You know, what was the illusion that I was holding that was keeping me from being able to just sit and be present in that
Yeah.
space of love?
Yeah. And sitting in that love, like without needing an external
Yeah.
stimulus, or even without needing like a sign of progress, is
Girl.
actually like the greatest sign of awakening. It's like when we can just be in love with what is,
Yeah.
then the field shifts so that something new can come in. And the more we cling to that, you know, a dissatisfaction is like, it's like the opposite of the bliss, is like
Mhm.
always like waiting for that next bit to come in, keeps us from like the full appreciation of every bit
Yeah.
of beauty that life is bringing to us.
Ugh, and I fail at that regularly. You know, I'm alone so much. Most of the time I'm fine, but every once in a while I'm like, I want a partner. I want a land to sit on. I want a dog. Like I want a dog. I want a pit bull. I fail at that all the time. I can see what I think I'm trying to do, but I don't want to accidentally make it sound like I got it. You know, like I don't got it. I often have wants come up. I really want to be in Mongolia right now. I'm not, you
Mm,
know, that's the closest thing I have to a home right now. So
yeah.
sitting with that and not you know, I feel sadness come up right now even talking about it, and that's beautiful too. So
Yeah,
just sitting with all of it.
totally. And yeah, I think I understand that longing really deeply, and I was going through a lot of longing. Like the one for me is always this core feeling of a partner. Like why is this not in my life? Why has it been like 5 years now since there's been this kind of a connection? And I've really come to start to see that a bit differently, in just this kind of state of emergency we're in changes everything, and my plans can't follow through. But I've shifted my awareness into this pain that is still held in my body physically and in the emotional body, right? It's like all interwoven, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like this moment of recognition that, you know, the external, it can change, but it can never really fulfill you, because you are, you know, living through this vessel. And if the vessel isn't in integrity, and what integrity can means like living through your values, and integrity also means having a solid structure that leads to something that can grow. And so both of those degrees of integrity, if your body, if your vessel is not in integrity, you know, you can bring the partner in, but the tower is going to fall, like the tarot
Yeah.
card.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so
Yeah.
I've come to a lot of acceptance in everything that's lacking, and just remembering, like, at the core, like how all of this began for me was yoga. So it's an 8, 9, even 10-year journey, and there's still blockages.
Mm.
And it's like I learned to just enjoy the process of clearing myself out, and
Yeah.
knowing that every time I do that, there's greater love. And knowing that, with this feeling of longing, every time I feel that longing, um, I get closer to the divine. That longing, like just like the Rumi, the poetry of this
Yeah.
great ecstatic love for the beloved. Like every time we just, go and sink into the shit of that longing, because it hurt, and
Yeah.
we just let it rip us open, and
Yeah.
then the love goes to that deepest spot. It's
Mm.
like when you're getting a massage, you gotta just let that person rip your muscle open, open, open. And when you get to the core of it, that's when there's this shift, and the energy goes to the place that needed it, and then everything changes. So yeah, I'm with you in that feeling, like, oh, things haven't come together yet. And I also see that as like one of the greatest gifts of the path. It's so
Yeah.
necessary.
And what you're saying, I think we can see happening in the collective right now too. I have a lot of people asking me what I think about the virus and everything, and I don't know. I've never been in a pandemic before, so I'm gonna go ahead and wait. This isn't a horse race. I don't need to bet and say I think this, that, or the other. But I think what I do see is it's an opportunity for personal, like, what is my practice in this moment? I'm very grateful for my practices, and then collectively, what you're saying too. I mean, I find it a little frustrating because things like climate change. You and I have traveled through parts of the world where we've seen extreme poverty. People are not panicking about these things the way that they're panicking about the virus, and I find it a little frustrating that it's only because it's the personal, oh, this could happen to me, that suddenly. But at the same time, okay, like, this is where we are. And so much of what you're saying about, like, getting that, when you get that massage and you have to really get in, we're all going, everyone can relate to that right now on this planet, in their ways.
Yeah.
In their ways. Well, maybe this makes me think, this might be a nice time to talk. We're talking very, not abstractly, but you and I both offer, support to help people find their own way. And maybe it would be nice to talk a little bit about, like, how we do that. Like, how do we take from, like, oh, just do this, to, like, what does it actually mean to be sitting with us as we work with people.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it's well, with the channeling, like I'm kind of in this altered state.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to really find the words for it, because I am fully aware, but it's like I really give myself over to this current of energy. And through my awakening process, like I've really learned and felt and experienced my guides always being with me. So it is like this, as long as I'm in a calm state, a switch that I can turn on, and then the energy starts to flow. And it's really like coming from a place of, ooh, I love it, their own kind of the deepest questions. And the Pleiadians speak to that and shed some light there. Though also, like when I work one-to-one with people in person, like there's a lot more that I have access to, working with sound healing and getting people to really feel that in their body, like I work with the plant medicine, cacao, and that really helps people get that heart emotional energy flowing. And I often will then combine the channeling with sound and teach about sound, just in, bringing our awareness deep to our breath and deepening our breath and making tones with intention is enough to, like, work through so many of the blockages that people ignore, or that send people on these kind of negative loops. Yeah.
So for you and I think channeling is really primary in the work that we do. You're
Yeah.
one of the other people I know who channels as strongly as I do, and I don't really know how people do this work, to be honest, without channeling, because anytime
Yeah.
I'm doing a session with anyone, I'm not doing it. My
Yeah.
job is the rest of the time to keep my vibration in sync so that when it's time, I can just back out.
Yeah.
And that's primary for me. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting that we're both drawn to sound healing too.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just the way that these higher energies are carried through the
Yeah.
sound wave.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think one
And
of the things I love, I have my bowls with me. Oh my gosh, well, you saw me in Mexico, and that was me traveling light in Mexico. And remember, I had all that stuff. now,
yeah,
now I left America knowing I probably won't be back for about 8 months, and I'm not a backpacker. I have like all my gifts for Mongolians. I have my gifts from Mexico for my teachers in Mongolia, and I carry all my, not all, but like my set of sacred bowls with me. But I also love that sound healing you can do remotely. So I can be here in the Arctic and I can do a session with someone in Connecticut because I can just, with the ways that these energies work, I just bring the body in, the energetic body in, all of that being done through, for you and I, so long as I think we keep our vibration like high and tight with the higher
yeah,
beings around us, then the 3D is not where we're working in. So I can be using these bowls even and doing sound healing remotely.
totally.
Love that.
Though beyond the sessions you do, your connections with your guides are happening all the time, and I'm kind of familiar with that because I mean I got to a point where like when my psychic opening happened for me, it happened after kind of years of working with teachers and working with teachings and having a regular practice of doing yoga and meditation for several hours a day. It all just kind of switched on. And then I was seeing these entities around the room. I was seeing people's aura. I was seeing all this stuff all the time. And for me, it was like I had to say to my guides, like, I don't want this. I don't want this, like, living in this kind of alternate reality because I'm already kind of ungrounded. It's not an alternate reality. It's just seeing, like, all the components of it. Like,
Yeah, you can see
make
more.
yeah, make this easier for me. Make this something that I can turn on and turn off. And they kind of complied with that. And I, when I need to get that message from the Pleiadians, even if I'm walking down the streets, it's just a matter of like focusing a little bit more and asking, and I get the response. I get it as a voice and as a feeling in my body. But your connection seems to be like always on, and like as we were hanging out together, you were getting these messages, and they were kind of whispering to you. So I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, like what we were saying earlier, the way that you experience your support team around you and the way I experience my support team around me in some ways is very different. But what we have in common is we made an agreement. So
Yeah.
they are 100% always on 24/7. That's how I roll. I don't, it seems to be very common for the Mongolian shamans that I know and my teacher as well. I have my primary spirit that I've taken in and made an initiation with, and he is something like my boss, my grandfather, my coach, sometimes a jerk. But he's the primary one. He's always with me. I have a very like, the way I work. I have a team. I only allow in who I have made, like we've made an agreement. So I have my tight circle, and I don't know, there's a team of them. Let's just say I don't want to get into all the details right now. But it means when I hear a voice, I'm so obsessive about like protecting my energy and keeping it clean, which is a daily thing. It means all that work that I do to constantly ground and protect, ground and protect, ground and protect. When I hear a voice, I know specifically who it is. I developed relationships with these different spirits. I know their personalities. Like one of my guides, he does not like the men that I date, and he he's very opinionated, and he's kind of old school. Like he's from several hundred years ago, and he has very different values than I do about gender, basically. And
Wow.
he's a energetic guide, and he's very important to me. But if I hear him giving me advice about who I should date, I'm not interested.
Wow.
And that's like a lot of how I work when I work with people too. I help people. I tend to get people who are just starting to have these awarenesses and they're freaked out. These are the people that
Yeah.
often come to me and they're like, what the heck is happening? Because as we've mentioned before, I was in a cosmically beautiful way. I was a very Western trained PhD level clinical psychologist. Didn't believe in any of this. So very spontaneously one day, as I was working as a licensed psychologist, I started hearing voices. I started hearing voices of the deceased. So it was a very rapid transformation for me. I immediately knew I'm not crazy, but apparently I've been wrong about everything. And it was an incredibly destructive process. And those first couple of years were awful. I didn't have any teachers. That's my karmic unfolding. I needed to go through that without any guidance to feel what that was. Those are the kind of people that I now tend to come to me. They're in that space of like, holy crap, I think someone is sitting in that chair, but I know there's no physical person sitting in that chair. So when they come to me, the first thing I tend to do is I help them just kind of clean house and be like, well, who's here? You know, like a lot of times it's ancestors that come in. Some of our ancestors are really beautiful guides. Some of them, it almost seems like the farther out they go, the more they become sort of like a collective ancestor rather than a specific Aunt Mary or something.
Yeah.
But some of our ancestors, you know, if they were opinionated when they died, they might be opinionated after they died. And if you wouldn't take your Aunt Mary's, I feel bad because one of my aunt's names is actually Mary. And it keeps coming through right now. I'm sorry, Aunt Mary. She's alive at the moment, as far as I know. But like, for example, if you wouldn't listen to your Aunt Mary's advice when she's alive, even if she's really good at communicating with you and when she's passed, you might not want her as a guide. So like when I start working with people, it's like, who's around you? And let's check in with, do they have your highest good? Also, when people go to a lot of these like plant medicine ceremonies and all these different collective consciousness groups that happen, you might have something like an Aunt Mary or more of a like ascended master from one person in that group who just wants to help and will kind of move on to anyone else who's looking for guidance in that group. So sometimes, which is beautiful and absolutely fine, sometimes when people come to me, they will have hundreds of guides around them. And it's just, as I work and when people come to me, what I say is like, would you take, if you like, do you want hundreds of guides? Basically, like, no, that's so chaotic, right? It's already weird enough to have a couple entities. So who's around? You're in control. Like once at least in control mostly of what guides you want to have around. I have a couple of guides that I seem to have come into this life with, and I've actually tried to kick them out and they don't go away. But my primary Mongolian guide, oh, he's so sneaky. Oh, he drives me bananas. I give up. I spent years trying to kick him out, but he's very shapeshiftery. So he'd come in as like, oh, I have all these stories about him. He just drives me crazy. I give up. He's clearly, I don't have control. So he's with me no matter what. But a lot of other people I've kicked out. So now I have my tight team. So when I work with people, that's the first thing I do is like, who do you want in your house?
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to know at least some of them. You might not always know all of them. It's not as precise as I'm making it sound, but it's good to start with that. And then protection. Like, would you go to sleep at night in a city with your door unlocked and open? You know, it's not the same thing as shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a while to be able to know the difference. I'm not closing. I'm locking my door. I don't want every spirit that's moving through coming in, you know? So teaching people how to connect, how to find their guides, how to choose who they want with them, and then how to really like set boundaries in terms of like protecting yourself from unwanted spirits, but also like you're saying, set boundaries with your guides as much as you can. My one of my things is they can talk to me basically whenever they want, but I don't want to see it. I travel so much. I don't want to go into a space and open my eyes in the middle of the night and see some ghost over me, like, woo. Like, I'm okay with feeling them. And I've literally, you know, I travel in some pretty energetically intense places. It's not uncommon for me to be so merged with different energetic. It's hard to find a language around this. I'm operating in many different dimensions at the same time as you are. It's not uncommon for me in the middle of the night to have a ghost poke me, and they'll physically move me. I'm even okay with that. I don't want to see you. That's my line. I don't see. So
Wow.
finding those boundaries. So that's a little bit of also. I think it's helpful for people to kind of hear, like, how do we help people be able to find this rhythm for themselves, because it's going to look different for everyone. Is that what you find?
That it looks different for everyone? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like we all have different psychic senses that are more finely tuned, and some people will see things more, some people will hear things more, some people will just get the core kind of sense of knowing. And for me, it's like, it's more of that like feeling, knowing, hearing at this point. There was a lot of seeing at other points, but it's like, it's almost like too much for me somehow. Like you were saying, it was like, it doesn't it doesn't work for me to always be seeing what's happening on these other levels. And for me, I don't work with like that many guides. I work with a couple Pleiadian guides I know, and they're just at like this very high level that their consciousness is tuned into a collective. So they're like an emissary. They're kind of like an ambassador on behalf of this bigger consciousness. So I'm really familiar with that consciousness. And then I'm familiar with like other, different environments can kind of awaken this sort of like other energy for me. But it's all like I'm working a lot more with this star energy. Like you're kind of working more with this earthly energy.
Yeah.
And like, so I know when the Pleiadians are tuning into me. I know what the Syrian vibration looks like and when they're tuning into me. You know what the hybrid vibrations are like and when they're tuning in. Arcturian, Lyran, lion beings. Those are kind of the main ones that open up to contact with me. And sometimes like, yeah, for example, when I'm opening up, like doing a healing session with someone or on myself is a little bit different than like a channeling session. Like in a channeling session, it's like it is really about information. Like there's information that wants to be obtained for their transformation. And sometimes that information is part of healing. Like they can ask like, what's going on with this symptom I'm having or with my body, and then they will do an energy scan and kind of work through where there is that thing in their body and transmit some energy there. But when I'm doing like a healing session, for example, I don't do so much of this right now. It's kind of like I've gotten to a point with that where I'm focusing on other things. But then like there's many guides that come through that I'm not even fully aware of. Like I can be, because I started with, for me this was like a progression of like 2012, like waking up and dropping out of school at that point after kind of a year and a half of awakening. Yoga training led me to a studio where I learned Reiki, led me to channeling, led me to want to be in Mexico in 2012 when all this happened, led me to Guatemala where I met these crazy shaman who changed everything. So when I do the energy healing, it's like sometimes I'm holding my hands in one part of their body and then this other guide comes into another part and works energy through them. And sometimes in the night, like I ask for these like surgeries from my guides, and I sometimes don't even know who's coming through, but they move those energies around, and it's quite powerful. There are a couple guides that I have that are from like other incarnations, though I don't know if it's like me and kind of my way of seeing it, that like, yeah, like these other lifetimes I've had are not quite as important. Maybe it's just not the realm I work in, but they don't show up to me as much as like these extraterrestrial vibrations do.
So what does it feel like? Like how you can, I don't know if you want to answer this super specifically or broadly, but when you have these different, like the Palladians come in or the different kind of councils come in, it feels different. Do they each have their own signature?
Totally, they all have their own vibration. They
Oh.
all have their own kind of feeling to them. Like I would describe the feeling of like working with the Palladians as very like light and kind of almost conversational. Like it's like a dance when we're working with that energy. And then the Syrian energy, there's like a depth to it. There's kind of like a stillness to it that wants to bring it you deeper. The fly is like flying in front of the camera. The Arcturian energy is like almost very like practical. It's like when they come through, it's like there's this clear sense of like this deeper purpose to things. So all of their energy resonates in a different way. And I also bring their energy in through like light language. So I just like sing in this sort of like a nonsensical language. And it's all about like surrendering to the current of that. And it brings different beings in the space because I do group sound healing experiences. You experience one of those. Where I just get everyone into that like state of openness and preparedness and sing in the energies and sometimes like I have no idea what's coming through. Like I feel a presence of many different groups, but like it's like they suddenly like they're like it could feel like they're grabbing the mic back and forth from each other. Like, now I'll use the voice, now I'll use the voice. And as they're doing that, like sometimes people have had visions of the beings coming in and doing surgeries on them or like really intense like astral journeys that it's and you know as I've been going through this there's always a part of me in the back of my mind that because like I feel like these frequencies are so subtle and it feels so much like what we've been told is just your imagination that I'm like questioning this. And it's also because I'm a very like empathic, open person. When I feel I'm working with someone who still has doubts, like there's a part of me entertaining their doubts too. But then like when I see the results of what happens after people have these experiences, I'm always like, yep, like I don't know what just happened, but it definitely happened.
Yeah, I love the evidential. You're like, that's, we can't deny the physical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find like if you're in a place, well, it's interesting when you talk about your healing work because particularly when I do sound healing, it sounds a lot like what you're experiencing too. When I'm talking, I know who I'm talking to, but when it comes to that healing space, I just step back and what moves through moves through, and I don't always know who is what, and that's especially in groups. I'm just there for the ride, you know. I'm just almost become the conduit. When you like, let's say you want guidance on something, will you say, oh, this would be a good question for the Palladians, or do you just like how do you work that way?
um if I'm like in the flow and the question comes up, like really like busy doing something, that's not the moment. But if I'm in a more focused state, it just takes like that simple tune in, a couple of breaths, and like Pleiadians, what's up with that?
Yeah.
And I'll start to get the response. But it's like when we're in the very like they call it the beta brainwave frequency, which is very externally focused. Um, Washing dishes, walking through town, buying groceries. Like I'm not necessarily always tapped in those states. Though there are other times where I have been. It's like I feel like I'm moving at this chapter of my life. I'm moving pretty quickly when I'm doing those things, so I'm not as necessarily tuned in. But then it's like as simple as like taking that moment aside for meditation, and that allows for the information to come through.
That's interesting. Do you find that these different groups are better? Like I have a guy that I will call on quite frequently to help with like if I feel like I have blocked energy. He's great with the energetic body. So if I have a question, he's the one that I would never ask relationship advice to.
Yeah.
Do you find that you ask different groups for different questions, or do you just open up and see what guidance comes in?
Yeah, I work mostly with the Pleiadian group just because it's like they've made clear that there's kind of like a power to the consistency of our connection, the consistency of transmitting that message that wouldn't be as clear in my work if I was bringing through this being today and that being tomorrow. Though, yeah, when I always like open myself up to when I'm doing like a ritual, for example, like I open myself up to all the spirits, and especially when I'm doing a group ceremony, I open myself up to all of those realms and invite whoever wants to come through to come through. And oftentimes, like I will see and get a message from guides that I'm not familiar with that people bring into the space. Or I'll start to connect more with like that nature spirit or earth realm. And of course, the Pleiadians are not always the best for grounding. So connecting more with like inner earth beings or, you know, ancestor spirits or that energy of someone who's been and walked through the earth plane is kind of helpful for me in kind of grounding and anchoring here. And so I call on them for that.
So interesting. So interesting to hear how you work.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was I going to say? I was also wondering, like, when this just happened suddenly for you, were you doing anything in your life that you contribute to kind of like making you more intuitive or opening you up to that? Like, even as simple as meditation?
No,
No,
I'm
no.
busy being a little know-it-all psychologist. I mean, I don't want to totally disparage the work or the field. I have a lot of respect for Western psychology, but not only was I not doing anything, I was very much a material atheist. I was not agnostic. I wasn't open. I didn't believe in any of this, and so it was quite a rapid change because I didn't have any framework. I didn't even know about chakras. You know, so I started. I specialized in eating disorders. I had a couple of specialties, but that was one of three. And now looking back, I think, gosh, you know, there's like an energetic signature to a lot of these different ways that eating and relationships with self and others manifest. I'm kind of rambling, but like, it's coming up. Must be for someone. I would love, I look forward to there being a merging of Western psychology. I think a lot of the work that was being done was phenomenal. But if we could also have a language that I didn't have, which is let's look at the energy that's happening. Let's look at where these blockages are. Let's look at why these phobias are coming up in this way. I almost feel like it was very necessary for my path for me to not know what the F was happening. You know, that because those tend to be the kind of people that come to see me like what is happening. Those are the ones where I'm like, oh, come in, girl, I know, let's have some cacao. It's gonna get weird. But you're gonna be okay, you know. And I don't know, I could ramble about that for a while, but let's not.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really interesting as well that like it makes sense in a way that you attract people that are kind of like blown into an awakening process, and I attract more people who, like me, it's a gradual process. It's step by step, like working with this and consciously like saying, let's open the door more.
Yeah.
That's the people that I work with typically.
It's interesting how the universe knows, you know, they know what experiences we need and who we're a good match for. I have a friend, and I knew her when she was in graduate school, and I was there for her defense. She was studying, I don't remember what the exact discipline was, but basically she was studying marine ecology, specifically looking at marine mammals. And I was there for her defense, and she was showing all the statistics, which I can more or less follow, different discipline, but I'm also very trained in statistics, blah, blah, blah. We're there in our very scientific hats on, you know, I'm not like channeling in the middle of her dissertation. her dissertation finishes and she brings her dissertation advisor around and says, "Oh, this is the witchy friend I told you about." So this professor, who is her dissertation advisor, starts talking to me about like, who are these spirits that keep ringing my doorbell at night? And I was like, well, let's look at that. For whatever reason, the path that I walk, I often find myself getting a lot of reinforcement by meeting people who don't seem like they would be having these kind of experiences, and then they confide in me. Like when I left Western psychology, I told every last client why I was leaving. Thank God I didn't have my license. I mean, I walked away from my license anyway, but like that went well looking back. But I also told a lot of my colleagues, and there are different kind of flavors within Western psychology, but I was really in almost the extremist camp. They used to say in my graduate program, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. I know. Your eyes. Exactly. And those are like those, that was how I learned to bake bread. And so when I left, I told a lot of my colleagues, I told all my colleagues too. I was in private practice at that point. And I did get some weird reactions, but I would say about 50% of them behind closed doors, the therapists and the psychologists were also telling me, oh, I remember when I worked at a prison, I had a ghost follow me home. And my therapist, like the psychologist was saying, I had a ghost follow me home from the prison where I was working. And my therapist told me to go see her shaman. So it's happening. It's just, it's not, it's, I think whatever piece I'm being called into, I find I'm really being called into these spaces where it's like people who are very scientifically minded almost don't want this to happen, but they can't turn the train around. Yeah, I'm kind of in that. Whereas you're in these other spaces, and God, one of the things that I just think is so wonderful about you is you're such a truth teller. I constantly see you going into spaces and being like, you guys, actually, this is what's happening. I feel like it's
trouble.
yeah, but you really you have so much integrity, and it's one of the things I just absolutely love. It makes me trust you so much because you really say what you see in ways that are not going to be making friends for you always, I would imagine. But you're so centered on like, this isn't about ego people. This isn't about taking care of. This is like there's something bigger going on, and we need as a collective to be seeing clearly. In that way, I think you have you're constantly being called into these incredible spaces and saying the truth. I really love that about you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad you love that about me. Some people don't like it about me, and I think in general people always have a strong opinion about me, whether it's like intense love or intense like judgment, for those same reasons. And I'm also learning because I have this like weird astrological relationship with Mercury and Sagittarius, which is in detriment. And Mercury is this like the mental body communicating, and it's very Sagittarius is like so truth oriented. It does not give a shit.
Yeah.
And that's how that energy expresses through me, but it also kind of like can get me moving too fast without being so aware of the sensitivity of things. And what I'm really learning now is that like you only want to bring out so much cognitive dissonance in someone. Like there's like if I really like settle into this intuitive connection, like I can shatter like this amount of illusions in somebody, and that's just as much as they can handle for that day. And I shouldn't push more, because if I push them into that healing emergency, it's not actually for the greater good. But I mean, was my process, was like healing emergency. Like I had to find this path because there was so much shit up that if I didn't, it wouldn't have worked. So yeah, it's just interesting. And as you were talking as well, like I was kind of thinking that, I asked you, well, what could have led to this? And I think that self-inquiry that's inherent in psychology also starts to open the door, because you start to like, you must have this sort of curious attitude as a psychologist, and that curious presence that's looking for a solution, looking for answers, but has to be very focused and cautious. It's like you must spend a lot of time in that, at least an alpha brainwave state that helps you to kind of be a receptor.
Maybe. I
That
mean,
kind of,
it's sweet of you to say, and I'm gonna get myself in trouble saying this, but
yeah,
I feel almost like I'm sorry, talking over you. Not all, but a lot of psychologists are kind of know-it-alls.
yeah.
And I don't I never, not all, and some people I know who are psychologists or social workers are absolutely incredible and doing
Mhm.
what you're saying, but it wasn't the particular flavor of the training that I was in.
Mm.
I really think this is just something my soul has done again and again. When thinking back, I've always been extremely interested in consciousness. My undergraduate degree was in cognitive science. I've always been interested in like neural networks, and I think that this is just kind of the way that I roll.
Right. So it's just a sudden thing. It's acausal then.
Yeah,
I think
it's
still
just
part of me that's trying to like
yeah,
find the formula, but sometimes there isn't one.
maybe.
Sometimes it just happens,
I
and
don't
that's also source's wisdom, is that we always look for a reason for something, but sometimes it just happens.
yeah, the 10,000 things, they just unfold and unfold and unfold. And
Yeah,
energetically, this is what the energy was going to do.
yeah. Okay, there's one thing else I wanted to include because it's still in my mind, of this sense of like, okay, we're talking about the deceased spirits,
Mm-hmm.
ghosts, or even somebody's. For me, I always experience a very clear difference between a ghost and the energy of someone's higher self,
Yeah.
because their higher self is the part of them that has gone through this remerging with source, and it still has a quality of their energy, but maybe doesn't necessarily have their opinions. And whereas a ghost, or like a soul fragment they leave behind, is almost like the shell of their personality that's still hanging out on the astral. Do you experience something similar, or what's your experience with them?
Very, very similar. And I got really confused the first couple of years. I didn't know the difference. I would just talk to anything.
Yeah.
Now I'm more picky. So generally, I don't. If I feel a ghost, it's just being brought to my attention so I can kick it out, because it's like I'm
Right.
in a hotel room and it's got to go. I don't generally interact with that kind of vibration too much. I have
Yeah.
sent some home, but how you describe it is roughly how I experience it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because people ask sometimes in sessions, like, can they talk to deceased relatives? And the Pleiadians are happy to bring them in, and we talk to them, and their message is usually kind of similar. And I kind of like, I don't want to like uh, dispel like this feeling of connection to anyone who's passed on for people, but it's almost like the feeling that I get is like, if the spirit of that deceased being wants to be with you, it will make itself clear to you already.
Yeah, but I have to say I've experienced some spirits that are not. I don't know about. Hmm, I'm not going to qualify it. I'm just going to say the vibration that I have worked with sometimes might have been someone who caused physical trauma to the person, or who was very vengeful, and then they come to the physical, still embodied spirit soul, the person I'm working with, and they basically want the physical person. It gets so confusing. The spirit coming through is not repentant, has not done their own soul work, but wants forgiveness for having harmed the other person from the person still in body. And
Mhm.
I don't. I think it's important for people to understand it's super okay to set boundaries with spirits. If you, um,
Is he
especially
love?
especially with sexual trauma, I've seen that the perpetrator,
Can't talk.
something like that, the perpetrator after they pass might come back and they haven't done their own soul work, but they want the person to say they want to come in, and the person who's still in physical form, they have the right to say, I'm not interacting with you anymore, whatever they want. But I don't always let all spirits through, or I talk to the person, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. we don't want all of the spirits there. And that's also something I learned with this idea of ancestor work, is that we don't want contact with all of our ancestors. In traditions that work with ancestors, there's an awareness of guardian ancestors, ones that have made it to a point of peaceful self-awareness, that they are actually reliable guides, because many of the ancestors in our lineage are seeking to perpetuate the patterns that they knew in their lifetime through us. And so, like, other healers I've worked with have said they didn't know the difference, and they always invited the ancestors, and they had to stop because they weren't being specific with their invitations.
Yep.
So it's something that, like, when you're making an invocation on this big higher level, like dear this, dear that, please come through, it's always working, it's always received. But you have to be so specific with who you invite in.
That's exactly how I experience it as well. And I think when we're healing ourselves, we're doing the healing work for the ancestors.
Totally.
But they don't exactly. We don't need, like what you said. That's just how I sense it too.
Yeah.
Well, it is my favorite time of day here because I get my 3 hours of dark. What is up with that?
This is Batman.
I know, I almost got it wrong. What's up with Batman?
I don't know. He was just here, and he was reminding me of the last time that we were together. Like you said, the Bat spirit.
Oh, right.
Is coming up.
Here he is.
And then in Mexico, after we parted ways, I ended up at this volcano of bats where millions of bats were coming out of one of the deepest caves in Mexico in the middle of the jungle in Campeche. And the bat spirit was kind of telling me, like you were saying, that it was representing like trying to do it the normal way, trying to do it the daylight way, whereas I was meant to be upside down and seeing in the dark.
I love it.
The bats were also showing me this sort of echolocation. Like that was my own personal journey of like, it's an internal sense of echolocation, that I'm making these sounds, I'm making these vibrations. The feedback I'm getting is directing me on a path. I don't need to know the path. I just have to keep putting out the sound. And then all of this comes out with fucking coronavirus supposedly coming from a bat.
A virus. Yeah, I was speaking it. I didn't say it, but yeah, exactly.
From a bat.
From a bat.
So I just thought it was interesting that like all of this bat stuff is in the collective. And a couple of months before it happened, before you went to China, we were tripping on the bat.
That was in Portland, wasn't it? That was when we first met. Wow, that's physically met. That's totally trippy. All right, well let's enjoy sitting in the unknown. I'm really glad. This is actually really nice because surprise, surprise, I'm rather isolated up here. So I put some earrings on. I'm all fancy. Felt like I had a little date with you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for connecting and for sharing all this. And I'm sure some people will get some good downloads from this. And yeah, how do people contact you if they want to?
They can go to my Facebook page, which is Beyond Mind Lies Heart. Beyond Mind Lies Heart. And I also have a YouTube page of the same name. That's the best way to contact me. Maybe you can put it in the link below. I'd appreciate that.
I will do that.
Can I see your tattoo before we go? Your new finger tattoo? I saw it a bit when you were showing the back. Oh, I love it.
It's Saturn and Aquarius. We have Saturn and Aquarius right now. And the video is probably coming up around the time of the new moon, where Saturn in Aquarius is square Moon in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus. So we've got this dynamic fixed energy coming in to kind of help us restructure things right now.
I love it. On the heart meridian. It's very powerful. It's very powerful when it came through. I love it.
I want to get all of the astrology symbols, I think, but I might, every part of the hand is a planet or a sign. So I was thinking of getting all of them on the hand, but.
Oh, I think it'd be gorgeous.
It would be, probably. Let's see.
Pandemic. Oh my gosh, I was posting something on Instagram. Oh, I'm on Instagram too. Thank you. It's Francis underscore says, SEZ underscore relax. Francis says relax. And I was doing some silly hashtag of like, hashtag quarantine. And now they have the hashtag quarantine 2020 because everyone's like recognizing, hey, maybe in the future we needed to qualify which quarantine this was.
Oh shit.
So maybe your next tattoo can be for the next pandemic. And you can just go through the planets.
I'm not choosing that reality.
Sitting in the
Or maybe I am.
massaging it out.
I have no clue.
I love you, Dante.
You too. Beautiful connecting. Thank you for this. And enjoy your magical nighttime up there in the Arctic. And I'm going to go out for a little bit for the last couple of hours that I can here during my curfew time.
Moment of gratitude for all of our guides and energies around us too, and the lands that are supporting us at this time. Thank you so much, because you and I both know this work doesn't get done without all of that support around us. Maybe for the highest good of all.
And sometimes it takes us to some uncanny places and situations, and it all brings us to awaken and find greater compassion and release from all of those concepts we have that limit us.
Amen.
Oh. Amen.
Have a good night. I don't know why I said amen. I haven't said that in a while. I don't know what spirit just found its way through me.
Let's leave them where they are.
Yeah, get out. Gotta go do some purging. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.